And welcome back to part 2 of chapter 2X of Thracia 776. Theoretically, if I dismounted Finn, he could travel further along the sand. Unfortunately, dismounting a mounted unit drops their movement rate by 3 points, so he would get the same amount of distance anyway. I'm still calling it. The sand in this chapter is pointless. It's very jarring to see almost all of the regular units in this chapter be level 1 or 2, and then in the next chapter they're suddenly 10 to 12 for the most part. Yikes. If Tanya is trying really hard to prove her worthiness, then Ronan just isn't giving a fuck. I said in the last part that I was doubting Havan's ability to still be useful. Well, I finished recording for the next chapter, and he quickly proved me wrong. He'll be around for a little while longer, but if he wants to really stay on, he's gonna have to really pull some muscle. I don't know how many people know this, because I frankly don't know very many people who've played the very first Fire Emblem game, but that game actually gave you the very first recruitable pirate, Daros, who later reappears in the remake in Shadow Dragon. And he was even worse in that game, if you can, believe that having played Shadow Dragon. His skill growth was literally 0%. His speed growth was 10%. Like I said, Axemen were just not good units until this game. Well, maybe technically Lex in the last game, but Lex was good because the Hero Axe was good. Otherwise, he would have been a mediocre unit at best. The 3 mercenaries past the bridge are overall not too threatening. Just don't leave one of your Axemen completely alone where all 3 of them can attack them. They have weapon triangle advantage, so they may do a fair amount of damage. Additionally, you're going to definitely want to try to capture as many of them as you can. You're going to need their iron swords for later chapters. Trust me. Most of the time I try not to even bother with the pirates that keep spawning on the southern area there where Dagda is. Mostly because they're all level 1, which means at this point in the game, they're going to give you maybe 10 or 15 experience for killing them. You're mostly just wasting uses on your weapon. The next chapter has level 10, 8, and 12 enemies that'll give you much more experience. Looking over the different stats for Thracia 776 as I'm, trying to see if I made any mistakes, I did notice something that this translation patch does a bit weirdly. The class names for those mercenaries, as I've been calling them, are actually sword fighters. In this translation, they're called Myrmidons. In the raw game files, the sword fighter promotes to mercenary, and in this, these Myrmidons promote to hero, which is the promoted class of mercenaries in later games. And Tanya and Ronan are technically not archers, as I've been calling them. They're actually bow fighters. Archers in this game are actually an enemy-only class that doesn't promote. So, Othin and Havan are axe fighters. Those guys are sword fighters. Tanya and Ronan are bow fighters. If they bothered to go with all this, why did they not put lance fighters in? Isn't that weird? I mean, it took until Path of Radiance to give us soldiers as playable units. And on that note, lances in this game kinda get the shaft, no pun intended. They're all great weapons, and Finn really is an amazing unit, but when you get to indoor chapters, there are really no lance units you can use. You don't get a lance armor, mounted units have to dismount before going inside, and when you eventually get a general that could feasibly use lances, both of the possible ones you get start with an E rank in lances. Weapon ranks take a long time to go up in this game, so you're never going to be able to use lances in the later chapters when all of them are indoors, effectively making them all useless. But theoretically, let's say you do get a general with a good rank in lances, so you can use, say, steel or killer lances in the later chapters. Well, that doesn't mean anything, because armored units in this game suck. They all have terrible magic, and the later chapters in the game are filled with powerful magic users and stave users. So if you bring an armored unit, they're just going to get ripped to shreds by magic, or blown away by sleep staffs and berserk staffs. They're liabilities. Lance users just don't get opportunities in this game. It really sucks. Huh. Ronan triggered continue, got a movement star, all so he could try really hard to hit that mercenary once. Maybe you heard my comment earlier, but doesn't matter anything, unless you somehow get, I don't know, 5 points of strength and 5 level ups. Just not using you, buddy. The dilemma here is I really want this guy's iron sword, but I also want to capture that warrior so I can get a steel axe. I was checking his build to make sure that my axe guys could capture him, and looks like it's a go-ahead. I don't know why I thought about Dagda hurting this guy, because he's going to kill him. It may look like he'll just double him and do a little bit of damage, but I keep forgetting this guy has charge and he'll just have another round of combat. I wish there was an option to turn it off. Unlike later games, hand axes and javelins in this game are overall pretty bad stat-wise. I think it's pretty clear that they were kind of almost like an emergency ranged weapon for when you didn't have a bowman or a magic guy to attack someone at range. That Brave Axe and Finn's Brave Lance are going to be my saviors for capturing units. I'm so glad you get them both in the first chapter. This game would have been so much harder if you had to get them later. And spoiler alert, in the next few chapters, I get a Brave Sword. which is just as good as the Brave Axe. The only difference is the Brave Sword requires a B rank in swords, unlike the Brave Axe, which only requires a D rank. So while I can pass the Brave Axe along to almost anyone that uses axes, the Brave Sword is only be going to my seasoned sword users. Actually, funny thing about axes, weapon ranks in this game go from E to A, but there's no A rank axe. There are A rank lances and swords, there's the Master Sword and Lance and the Sleep and Berserk swords, all of those have A rank, but even the Master Axe is only B rank. It's kind of an interesting thing about axes, like even in the GB8 and Tellius series games, the Steel Axe was an E rank, while all of the other steel weapons were one rank above their iron counterparts. I wonder why that is. Are they implying that axes are somehow easier or take less skill to use? Who knows? The sound effect for the javelin falling on the enemy just sounds like about the most cartoonish thing you could possibly find in a video game. I mean, the whoosh sound. Really? That mercenary on the fort on the right is Shiva. He's a guy I can get later in the game. He's also holding a kill edge. I really want that kill edge, and the reason I had to reset this chapter twice is because I tried to capture him and take it. First time, I killed him. The second time, he killed one of my units. So this time and the third time, which is when someone got a crit on Leaf, I didn't even bother. Oh well. This part is coming to a close, so I'll see you guys in part 3 of Chapter 2X, and then eventually Chapter 3. The preliminary recording for that was over an hour long, so I'm going to have to edit the crap out of that if I want to get it under 5 parts or something. See ya!